As Genesis chapter 1, verses 24 and 28 states, humans had dominion over all creation. You can't have that dominion if there's no communication. And so there's that. I think we were natural, organic whisperers. That's what we did. I know of a young girl. She's a Christian, so happens, in India. She's an elephant whisperer. And people call her in when elephants come. They're upset and they come and destroy crops, or they'll be attacking, and she'll communicate with them. And she says she goes off and she prays with them. Now I leave you to do the investigation and look up some of these people that I'm talking about, that I'm referring to. And so consider Luke chapter 19, verses 30 to 35 as a minor example of dominion. We're talking about Christ here. When they say his disciples were supposed to go to a village and find a donkey that had never been domesticated. Nobody had ever sat on this animal. And they put their clothes, they put garments on that animal, and Jesus sat on that animal, and it submitted immediately. I've never heard anybody talk about that. Doesn't happen in the natural. You get on one of those animals, they're gonna bump you off. And burritos, those little donkeys, they throw you a lot harder than a horse will. They will throw you because they're constitutional. They're the pit bulls of equines. And so, like these little donkeys, but he immediately submitted to Jesus, immediately. And the Bible emphasizes, the Gospels emphasize that no one had ever sat on him before, on that animal before. That's dominion. The Bible speaks of Christ going out into the desert, and it says he was with the wild beast. They weren't a threat to him. I believe those mountain lions were purring like kittens around him. You can say what you want, but it says he was with the beast, and Christ was not threatened by them. Speaking of Christ and dominion, consider 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 45. The Bible calls Christ the last Adam. Christ, the last Adam. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 45. And so, look at all the abilities that Christ displayed. What did the original Adam, what kind of creature was he? What were those that walked the earth that wasn't under the curse of the fall? Christ had dominion over the creation, the entire creation, down to the molecular level. Now consider this, down to the molecular level. He commanded water molecules to sustain him. He walked on water. He walked across its surface and commanded a storm. He had dominion over the elements. He commanded the storm to be calmed. You could probably even imagine him walking on the water during that storm and him not even being wet. I'm talking about his hair. He didn't come all stringy and all soaked up. No, he had control. And the interesting thing was he sent his disciples out before him. It was night. It's during a storm, and he saw them struggling on the lake during the middle of a storm at night. Okay, this is not something that a normal human being is going to do or going to be able to do. And it says, on the other occasion, he turned water into wine. That's dominion down to the molecular level. He commanded cells and molecules of bodies ravaged by disease, injuries, or even death to be healed. He reversed the cause of and the damage, the ravages of leprosy. He even temporarily reversed the curse of death itself on several occasions. I say temporarily because those who he did raise from the dead eventually had to die, and they will raise again on the last day. But he just showed his dominion and his control, his power over all things. He's the last Adam. What was the first Adam? And I think he was just an example, a sample of what? Because he submitted himself to the curse of death. He said, no man takes my life from me. I give it up willingly. We're going to come back to that in a second. Christ gave the maximum example of why God had to mitigate man's power after the fall in Gethsemane in John chapter 18, verses 1 to 11. Let's take a look at that scripture. If you have your Bibles, open them up. But Christ showed why man could not handle this power. The curse of the fall combined with the power that God had originally, the abilities that God had originally given to man would have made him a horrible, a deadly creature. Christ could have manifested the power of God that he possessed in the form of a self-protecting wrath. However, he merely used it to show that he was still controlling the situation. Let's observe that. So you get a glimpse of how powerful and how much authority he had. I have to explain, to get a real glimpse of that, I have to explain Roman military order. Now, you're going to say, well, Dr. Parker, why do you have to explain Roman military order to talk about the power of God? Well, it's not that the Roman military was manifesting the power of God. No, but just give me a second, and I'll explain it to you. The soldiers that came to arrest Jesus in Gethsemane were not Roman troops, but were of Herod's military. There was actually no difference. They were Herod's military. They were conceded to him. Nevertheless, Herod's army was organized precisely as was the Roman military, because they had to be ready to be conscripted and fully integrated into a unified Roman fighting force at any time. So they were regimented in the exact same way. And they probably had a different uniform, whereas the Romans are generally known historically to have had red in their military gear. I believe it was Herod's was blue. And so they would know where the troops came from in the different armies from the different regions of the Roman Empire. If there were forces that were native to that region, had their own colors, so that at least they could be recognized. If they had to be spoken to in a different language, or they had to be understood in a certain way, they're from that. But they knew how to integrate because of rank and military order. All of it was harmonious. And so first of all, I'm going to give a little encapsulated history. It's going to be very brief, of the Roman army. First, there was the format of the Roman army under the monarchy, or the regal period. That it had one order. Following that, it evolved into another military format during the Republic, the Roman Republic. And finally, it found its zenith during the period of the Empire. And this is what we find in the scriptures during the Empire period and its Roman and its order. And so we have, there's a lot written about how the Roman military was ordered. That's not a mystery to any of us. They hide it in things called books. I'm being facetious here. So you can know exactly how the Roman legion consisted anywhere between 5,000 and 6,500 soldiers. Now that depended on the region they were in, whether it was a bellicose region, whether they were in times of peace or times of stress, or whether there was a threat imminent. And there are a couple of other factors. Your average legion was approximately 6,000 soldiers. It could have been just a little bit under, a little bit more. 500 sounds a little bit more, and a whole thousand, between 5,000 and 6,500. That's a pretty big pendulum. But they say your average legion was approximately 6,000 soldiers. Now this depended on whether there was, as I said, the troops were deployed in dangerous zones and bellicose zones, or at regions of conflicts, or whether it was a time of peace, or they were fairly relaxed, knowing that there was total acceptance. It was more like just a large police force there in those regions, even of regions of peace. And so the Roman legion consisted of 10 cohorts. That's an important word, though. 10 cohorts that numbered cohort 1. We have the Roman number 1 to 10. Now, a cohort in Latin cohorts was composed of 3 maniples. Okay, manipulus. That's the Latin word, manipulus, but maniples. I had to learn some of these English terms just recently, because I use them in Latin or Spanish. But so maniples are. There were 3 maniples in every cohort. That's important. And every maniple consisted of 2 centuriae, or a century. A century, singular, is Latin centuriae. Centuriae. There's no soft C in Latin, so centuriae. That's what we call a century. And a centurion, we know, was a Roman officer over 100 soldiers. A century, and so so. If every maniple has 2 centuriae or centuriae, then that means every cohort had 600 men in it, 600 soldiers. 3 maniples in every cohort. So a century or centuriae was formed between 80 and 100 soldiers. Okay. That depends on if it's in time of peace or that. Now, as a matter of fact, the first cohort of the 1 to 10 was usually a bit larger, and they were the most aggressive soldiers. They were kind of like the Green Beret or the Navy SEALs of the Roman army. They were the toughest guys. They were the most bellicose of those soldiers, and they were the point of the spear. They were the first ones to go into battle. They were the most eager to go into battle, and they usually did a lot of damage, so that the other cohorts that entered in that same battle were actually cleanup crews. Of course, the second one would probably have quite a fight on their hands also, but by the time the 10th one, they were just cleaning up, mopping off. And so the number of personnel depended on the same stipulation as a region, depending on as a legion. It depends on how the region was. It depended on whether there's the centuriae or century is stationed in a place of threats or contentions, terrorism, bellicose action, or a region of relative peace or calm or well-being. That'll determine the number that's going to be in both the century or centuriae or in the legion. So, therefore, in summary, we have a Roman cohort composed of 3 maniples, and that means we're talking about 600 soldiers in each cohort. This brings us to John once again. This is why I want to give you that background, because now we come to John chapter 18, verses 1 to 11. Now, it depends on what your translation, because I know in Spanish, some of the translations will openly say a cohort was there. But we have, remember, our subject is Christ, the last Adam. Let's take a look at the power of Christ as the last Adam. Let's focus on John 18:3. Judas then, having received a band of men, I'll explain that term, band of men, I have an underline there, and officers from the chief priests of the Pharisees, he received them, like I said, they were Herod's soldiers, and they cometh thither with lanterns and torches and weapons. They came ready for a fight, okay? Now the word band is the Greek word spada, which is when it's translated back in the Latin is the cohort. That's your cohort. A spada is a cohort. And a Roman military cohort, the 10th part of a legion, which is approximately 6,000 soldiers, with a cohort, we're talking about 600 legionnaires. That's how many military personnel had come to arrest Christ. That's apart from the priest and all their gang. Let's put it that way. So what are we saying with this passage of scriptures? Remember, the scribes and the Pharisees did not want to publicly arrest Jesus during the feast of the Passover because they feared that it would provoke a violent uprising. Take a look at that in Matthew chapter 26, verses 4 and 5, and Mark chapter 14, verses 1 and 2. They said, don't arrest him during the feast because the people are going to riot. And so now when we read John chapter 18, verses 1 to 11, let's see what happened. When Jesus had spoken these words, he went out with his disciples across the brook of Kidron, where there was a garden, which he and his disciples entered. Now Judas, who betrayed him, also knew the place, for Jesus often met there with his disciples. So Judas, having procured a band of soldiers, there's that term again, band of soldiers, and some officers from the chief priest and the Pharisees, went there with lanterns and torches and weapons. Then Jesus, knowing all that would happen to him, came forward and said unto them, whom do you seek? They answered, Jesus of Nazareth. Jesus said unto them, I am he. Judas, who betrayed him, was standing with them. And when Jesus said to them, I am he, they drew back and fell to the ground. In other words, he knocked them down. It wasn't that they voluntarily drew back. They were blown away. They were knocked down, and I can humorously say like bowling pins. Just imagine a Marvel movie, just throwing them back. Just took them out, down. He didn't kill them. And he waited until they got up. And then he said, excuse me, whom do you seek? And as they got up and reincorporated themselves and got themselves together, some of them looking for their helmet, some of them trying to get their armor on straight again, they said, Jesus of Nazareth. And look at this. Look at the authority. Jesus answered, I told you that I am he. So if you seek me, let these men go. These guys come there with weapons. They're used to going in and wiping out the place. They could have taken them out easily. But who's in charge? Can you imagine? Today's world. SWAT breaks in. Hey, down, everybody down, move. And they're shouting and doing all this. And then one person stands up and says, okay, well, you're looking for me. You can let these guys go. No, they're going to take everybody in. Shut up, get down. Jesus tells them, yeah, I'm at the, and they go, oh, okay. And this was fulfilled. He's in charge. This was to fulfill the word that he had spoken. Those whom you gave me, I have lost not one. Now look what happens. Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant and cut off his ear. The servant's name was Malchus. And we have to take a look at something else. Look at Jesus' authority. So Jesus said to Peter, put your sword in its sheath, and shall I not drink the cup that the Father has given me? That's the last of John 18, verses 1 to 11. But that's not all. Luke continues the narrative by saying, one of them struck the servant of the high priest and cut off his right ear. But Jesus said, no more of this. And he touched his ear and healed him. This guy had come there to arrest and perhaps, if it need be, kill Jesus on sight. And Jesus healed him, used his power to heal one that came there as an enemy. I believe that Malchus ended up getting saved, and I believe that's why we know what his name was, because he became part of the church. And anytime Peter had something to say to the church, Malchus probably rubbed his ear and said, hey, you guys better listen to him. Listen to the pastor. Listen to Pastor Peter, because he knows how to use the sword. Okay, let's talk about it. Jesus could have used his power with deadly force, but he didn't. Christ had all of the original power of Adam. He just, boom, he just knocked you down. You're okay. You'll be all right. You can get up. He could have done it. Imagine, he could have caused them to age 10 years for every step they took towards them to take them away with violence. Or he could have just, what do I know, melted them, caused them to spontaneously combust. That's probably what a normal fallen human would have done, do anything to protect himself. At this crucial time, when he could have decisively defeated his enemies, he chose to heal them. He manifested his authority and power only for good and to fulfill his word. What would humans have done? We see this through our fantasy portrayals of superheroes. They fight, there's violence, they're going to take out the enemy. They're going to do what they can do, and they're going to egotistically display their power and show. We do that, and we don't have any power. We think we can fight. We're going to beat somebody up. So don't learn martial arts, because then you always end up having to use it. You have a gun, you're going to use it. And so and that's what, that's why we have bullies, because they think they can. And so Jesus said, the Father loves me because I'm willing to give up my life in order that I might receive it back again. No one takes my life away from me. I give it up of my own free will. I have the right to give it up, and I have the right to take it back. This is what the Father has commanded me to do. Jesus was in control. He had power. You talk about a superhero. He's God manifest in the flesh. But the Bible calls him the last Adam. How incredibly powerful could he have been? What could he have manifested? We know that he's the creator, and at the beginning he was with God. This is before the incarnation. Who are we talking about? They said, what manner of man is this, that even the wind and the seas obey him? So, yes, we're talking about the last Adam. What was the first Adam? What were the first people like? If humanity possessed this power in his present fallen state, we would only promote self and harm to others and further corruption. We would be a destructive force that could not be controlled. To this day, we promote ourselves in every single chance we get. Now, if I were to grant you, we've all heard that, 3 wishes, okay? I grant you 3 wishes, whatever you want. What are they? I'm going to tell you. How many of you thought, oh, let there be a cure for cancer. Oh, let there be peace. May man have understanding that he can work out all of his conflicts so that conflicts would cease to exist. Who would wish for that? I've never heard anybody say that. They want everything for themselves and for them to have power, for them to be the top dog in some way, shape, or form. This is why, after the fall and the flood, God took it all away from us. He took it away. He had to. Can you imagine? He then had to die. He had to have a limited lifespan. Because what are you going to do under that curse with all that power, with all that brain, remembering anything? That would have been a curse. He didn't let fallen man back into the garden because they would have laid hands on the tree of life. So the curse of death has actually become a manifestation also of God's love. We get to end it.
Available at Christian bookstores and online. Purchase it today.